I still remember the way her voice trembled when she said it, the words slipping out like a plea wrapped in a warning. You didn't see anything, right? She whispered, her hand clutching the curtain so tightly her knuckles turned white. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, knowing full well I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. That moment, that single sentence, changed everything for me. It wasn't just a question. It was a door I couldn't unopen, a secret I couldn't unsee. And now, years later, I'm finally ready to tell you what happened, not because I want to, but because I have to. This is my story, and it's as real as the ground beneath my feet. I've carried it like a weight on my shoulders, a shadow that follows me everywhere, and I can't keep it inside anymore. I need to let it out, to share it, even if it means reliving every moment of that night and the days that followed. It was late summer, the kind of humid evening where the air sticks to your skin like damp cotton, making you feel like you're moving through molasses. I was 24, fresh out of college, working a dead-end job at a small accounting firm in a town so quiet you could hear the crickets plotting their takeover. The town wasn't much to look at, just a cluster of faded storefronts, a gas station that always smelled faintly of diesel, and a diner where the locals gathered to complain about the weather or the mayor's latest bad idea. My apartment complex was on the edge of town, a crumbling relic from the 1970s with peeling paint and a courtyard that was more weeds than grass. The walls were so thin you could hear your neighbor sneeze, and everyone seemed to know everyone else's business, whether they wanted to or not. I kept to myself mostly, trying to save up enough to move somewhere bigger, somewhere with a pulse. But my neighbor, Clara, she was different. Clara was in her early 30s, with dark hair she always wore in a loose bun, strands escaping like they couldn't be tamed. Her eyes were what struck me most. They were deep, almost haunted, carrying a weight I couldn't quite place. She was polite but distant, the kind of person who'd smile and nod when you passed her in the hallway, but never lingered for a real conversation. We'd exchange small talk sometimes, about the weather, the noisy pipes that rattled like they were auditioning for a horror movie, or the landlord's latest excuse for not fixing the leaking roof. But that was it. She never invited me in, never asked about my life, and I got the sense she preferred it that way. Like she was guarding something or maybe hiding from it. I didn't push. I figured everyone has their reasons for keeping their distance. That night, though, everything changed. I'd come home late from work, around 9 p.m., exhausted from a day of crunching numbers and dodging my boss's passive-aggressive emails about deadlines I'd already met. My apartment was stuffy, the kind of heat that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel, so I opened the window to let in some air. The courtyard below was dark, just a few flickering streetlights casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. That's when I noticed Clara's window across the way, maybe 20 feet from mine. Her curtains were usually drawn tight, like she didn't want anyone glimpsing her life, but tonight they were open, and her living room was lit up bright, like a stage in a play I hadn't been invited to. I didn't mean to look, honest to God, I didn't. I was just glancing out, trying to catch a breeze when I saw her. She was pacing, her phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing wildly, like she was arguing with someone who wasn't giving in. She looked upset, almost frantic, her movements sharp and jerky. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language screamed tension. I told myself it was none of my business, that I should close my window and go about my night. But I kept watching, just for a second longer, drawn in by the intensity of it all. Then I saw him, a man tall, broad-shouldered, standing in her living room. He wasn't facing me, so I couldn't see his face, but I could tell he was angry. His shoulders were squared, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wasn't moving, just standing there, like a statue radiating menace. Clara was shaking her head, saying something I couldn't hear, her gestures growing more desperate. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a mix of curiosity and unease. Who was this guy? Why was she so upset? I knew I should look away, but it was like my eyes were glued to the scene. Then Clara turned toward the window, and our eyes met for a split second. My heart stopped. It was like she'd caught me red-handed, like I'd been spying on purpose instead of just stumbling into it. My stomach dropped, and I ducked back, pressing myself against the wall, my breath shallow. I told myself she hadn't seen me, that it was too dark in my apartment, that I was imagining the way her gaze had locked onto mine. But then I heard her window slam shut, the sound sharp and final, and when I dared to peek again, the curtains were closed, blocking out the light. My phone buzzed on the counter, making me jump. I grabbed it, my hands trembling, and saw a text from Clara. "Come over, now." I sat there, staring at the message, my mind racing a mile a minute. Why would she want me to come over? We weren't friends, not really. We'd never even been inside each other's apartments. I barely knew her beyond those fleeting hallway conversations. But there was something about the way she'd looked at me through the window, something urgent, almost desperate, that made my chest tighten. I tried to talk myself out of it, to convince myself it was a bad idea, but my curiosity, or maybe my guilt, got the better of me. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my shoes, and headed across the courtyard, my pulse hammering in my ears like a drumbeat. When I knocked on her door, it opened almost immediately, like she'd been standing right there, waiting. Clara looked different up close, Baylor, her eyes red, rimmed like she'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. Her hair was messier than usual, strands falling loose around her face. "Come in," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, like she was afraid someone might overhear. I stepped inside, and she closed the door behind me, locking it with a quick flick of her wrist. Her apartment was sparse, almost bare. Just a worn-out couch, a coffee table with a chipped edge, and a few cardboard boxes stacked in the corner, like she was always half ready to pack up and leave. The air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name, like the aftermath of a storm that hadn't fully passed. "You didn't see anything, right?" she said, turning to face me, her hands twisting the edge of the curtain she'd just closed. Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it, a crack in her composure. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words caught in my throat. I wanted to say no, to pretend I hadn't seen a thing, to make this moment go away. But the way she was looking at me, like she could see right through me, like she already knew the truth, made lying impossible. I saw you talking to someone," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, my cheeks burning with shame. Her face tightened, and for a moment, I thought she might cry or yell or throw me out. Instead, she shook her head, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You shouldn't have been looking," she said, her tone sharp but fragile, like she was holding herself together by a thread. I felt a pang of guilt, hot and heavy in my chest. "I didn't mean to," I said, stumbling over my words. "I was just opening my window and I didn't know. I'm sorry. Who was that guy? Are you okay?" I didn't know why I asked that last part. It just slipped out, born of the worry that had been gnawing at me since I saw her pacing. She didn't answer right away. She crossed her arms, pacing a little herself, her sneakers scuffing against the worn carpet. She looked like she was wrestling with something, trying to decide how much to tell me, if anything at all. Finally, she stopped and looked at me, her expression hard but brittle, like glass about to crack. "That was my brother," she said. He's in trouble, and now, because you saw him, you might be too." The words hit me like a punch. Trouble? What kind of trouble? My mind raced, jumping to 100 different possibilities. Drugs, debt, something illegal, something dangerous. I wanted to ask, to demand details, but the way she was staring at me, her eyes daring me to push further, made me hold back. There was something in her expression that told me she wasn't going to give me more, not yet, maybe not ever. "I won't say anything," I said instead, trying to sound reassuring, though my voice shook a little. "I promise." She nodded, but there was no relief in her eyes, no softening of her posture. "You don't get it," she said, her voice dropping lower. "This isn't about you keeping quiet. It's about what he thinks you saw." I didn't know what she meant, not really, but the weight of her words settled over me like a fog. She didn't explain any further, and I didn't have the courage to press her. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, like it was pressing down on us both. She asked me to leave, her voice polite but firm, and I did, my head spinning as I walked back to my apartment. The courtyard felt darker than before, the shadows deeper, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fridge, made me jump. I kept replaying her words, the way she'd said trouble, the way her brother's silhouette had loomed in her living room, the way her eyes had locked onto mine through the window. I told myself I was overreacting, that it was just a moment, that it would pass. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't. The next morning, I woke up groggy, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep. I looked out my window, half expecting to see Clara's curtains open, but they were still closed, her apartment dark. Her car was gone from the parking lot, and I figured she'd left early for work or maybe to deal with whatever was going on with her brother. I tried to go about my day, showering, eating a bowl of cereal, heading to the office, but my mind kept drifting back to her. By the time I got home that evening, her car was still gone, and her mailbox was starting to overflow with flyers and envelopes. I told myself she was just busy, that she'd be back soon, but a knot of worry was forming in my gut. Days passed and I didn't see her. Her curtains stayed closed, her apartment silent. I started to notice little things. The way the courtyard felt quieter without her coming and going. The way my neighbors avoided mentioning her when we passed each other in the hallway. I wanted to knock on her door to check if she was okay, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear, or maybe it was the memory of her voice, telling me I shouldn't have been looking. I tried calling her once, but her phone went straight to voicemail, and I didn't leave a message. What would I even say? A week later, I was coming home from work, my briefcase heavy in my hand, when I saw a man standing outside her apartment. He wasn't her brother, at least I didn't think so. He was shorter, wiry, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, obscuring his face. He was knocking on her door, not loudly but persistently, like he was sure someone was inside. When he saw me, he froze, his hand pausing mid-knock. For a moment we just stared at each other, and then he turned and walked away quickly, his steps clipped, like he didn't want to be noticed. My gut told me something was wrong, something beyond a nosy neighbor or a delivery guy. I fumbled for my phone and called Clara's number again, straight to voicemail. This time I left a message, trying to sound casual, though my voice cracked a little. Hey, it's me, just checking in. Haven't seen you around. Everything okay? She didn't call back. I kept expecting her to, kept checking my phone like a nervous habit, but it stayed silent. 2 days later, I got a text from her. Meet me at the diner on 5th Street, 8 p.m. Don't tell anyone. My first instinct was to say no, to stay out of whatever mess she was in. I wasn't a hero, not some detective in a movie who dives headfirst into danger. I was just a guy trying to pay his bills and keep his head down. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she needed help, and somehow I was already involved, whether I liked it or not. So I went. The diner on 5th Street was one of those old, school places, with sticky vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the Clinton administration. The air smelled of burnt coffee and greasy fries, and the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Clara was already there, sitting in the back corner, her hood up, nursing a cup of coffee that looked like it had gone cold. She looked worse than before, thinner, her cheekbones sharper, her eyes darting around like she was expecting someone to jump out at her. I slid into the booth across from her, my hands sweaty, my heart thudding. Before I could say anything, she leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. I need you to do something for me, she said. But you have to promise you'll never tell anyone, not a soul. I hesitated, my mouth dry. I didn't know what she was asking, but I could feel the weight of it, like a stone sinking in my chest. What do you need? I asked, my voice barely steady. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, sealed envelope, plain white with no writing on it. Take this, she said, sliding it across the table. Keep it safe. Don't open it. Don't show it to anyone. If something happens to me, you'll know what to do with it. I took the envelope, my hands shaking slightly as I held it. It was light, almost weightless, but it felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with its physical presence. Clara, what's going on? I asked, my voice rising despite myself. Who was that guy? Why are you so scared? What's in this? She shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes flicking toward the diner's entrance. The less you know, the better, she said. Just keep it safe, please." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, to shake her until she told me what was happening, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't just fear, it was resignation, like she'd already accepted something terrible was coming, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. I nodded, tucking the envelope into my jacket pocket, the paper crinkling against my fingers. "Okay," I said, "I'll keep it safe." She gave me a small, sad smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and then stood up. "I have to go," she said. "Don't follow me, and don't call me again." I watched her leave, her hood pulled low, her steps quick and purposeful as she disappeared into the night. That was the last time I saw her. I went home, hid the envelope in a drawer under a pile of old receipts and junk mail, and tried to go about my life. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the man in her apartment, about the envelope that seemed to burn a hole in my conscience. Every time I opened that drawer, I'd see it there, plain and unassuming, but heavy with secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to know. A few days later, I was coming home from work when I noticed a police car parked outside our building. My heart skipped a beat, and I slowed my steps, trying to act casual as I approached. The landlord was standing in the courtyard, talking to an officer, his hands gesturing wildly as he complained about something. I caught snippets of their conversation. Clara's name, unpaid rent. No one had seen her in weeks. My stomach twisted, and I thought about the envelope in my drawer, about her warning not to tell anyone. I wanted to say something, to tell the officer what I knew, but her words echoed in my head. "Don't tell anyone, not a soul." I kept my mouth shut and went inside, my hands shaking as I locked my door behind me. Weeks turned into months, and Clara never came back. Her apartment stayed dark, her car never reappeared, and her mailbox overflowed until the landlord cleared it out. I started digging, cautiously at first, not sure what I was looking for. I looked up her name online, scouring social media, news articles, anything that might give me a clue about where she'd gone or what had happened. I found nothing. No profiles, no missing persons report, no trace of her. It was like she'd vanished into thin air, like she'd never existed at all. But the envelope was still there, sitting in my drawer, a constant reminder of that night and the promise I'd made. I thought about opening it 100 times. Every time I reached for it, my fingers would hover over the seal, my heart racing with a mix of curiosity and dread. What could be inside? A letter? A photo? Something illegal? Something dangerous? I told myself I was keeping it closed out of respect for Clara, because I'd promised her I would. But deep down, I think I was scared. Scared of what I'd find, scared of what it would mean, scared of how much deeper I'd be pulled into whatever she was running from. One night, about 6 months later, I came home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart stopped. I knew I'd locked it before I left. I was obsessive about it, especially after everything with Clara. I stood there in the hallway, my keys clutched in my hand, listening for any sound from inside. Nothing, just the hum of the neighbor's TV through the wall. I pushed the door open slowly, my breath shallow, expecting someone to be there waiting for me, but the apartment was empty. Everything looked normal, the dishes in the sink, the pile of laundry on the couch, the stack of bills on the counter. Everything except the drawer where I'd hidden the envelope. It was open just slightly, and the envelope was gone. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I checked the drawer, rifling through the receipts and junk, hoping I'd just misplaced it, but I knew I hadn't. Someone had been here, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened. They came, took a report, looked around for signs of forced entry. There were none. No broken locks, no jimmied windows, nothing missing except that one small envelope. They wrote it off as a random break-in, told me to change my locks and be more careful, but I knew better. This wasn't random. Someone had come for that envelope, and they'd known exactly where to find it. I started sleeping with a baseball bat by my bed, checking the locks twice before I went to sleep, jumping at every noise in the night. I stopped talking to my neighbors, stopped trusting anyone. I kept waiting for something else to happen, for someone to show up asking questions, for a knock on my door in the middle of the night. But no one ever came. The days stretched into weeks, then months, then years. Life went on, work, bills, the same old routine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone was out there, waiting for me to slip up. It's been 3 years now, and I still don't know what happened to Clara. I don't know who her brother was, or what kind of trouble he was in. I don't know what was in that envelope, or why someone wanted it so badly they'd break into my apartment to get it. I don't know if Clara's out there somewhere, safe, starting over, or if something terrible happened to her. I think about it every day, turning it over in my mind like a puzzle I can't solve. I think about her voice, the way she looked at me when she closed the curtain, the way she said, "You didn't see anything, right?" I wish I could go back and tell her I didn't see a thing. I wish I'd never looked out my window that night. But I did, and now I'm left with questions I'll probably never answer. I've moved since then, to a new apartment in a different town, trying to put it all behind me. But it's not that simple. The memory of Clara of that night follows me everywhere. I see her face in strangers on the street, hear her voice in the quiet moments before I fall asleep. I keep expecting to get a call, a text, something that tells me she's okay, or that explains what happened. But there's nothing, just silence. I'm telling you this now because I need to let it go. I need to stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to come for me next. I need to stop replaying that night in my head, wondering what I could have done differently, what I could have said to make her trust me enough to tell me the truth. Maybe Clara's out there somewhere, safe, living a new life under a new name. Maybe she's not. All I know is that I made a promise to keep her secret, and I've kept it as best I could. But I can't carry it anymore. It's too heavy, too much. So here it is, the truth, as much of it as I know. I don't know if it'll change anything, or if anyone will even believe me. But I had to tell it for her, for me, for the part of me that's still standing in that courtyard, staring at her window, wishing I'd looked away. If you're listening, Clara, wherever you are, I hope you're okay. I hope you found a way out of whatever trouble you were in. And I hope you understand why I had to tell this story. I don't know if I did the right thing, keeping that envelope safe for as long as I did, or if I should have opened it, or turned it over to the police, or done something, anything, differently. All I know is that I saw something I wasn't supposed to, and it's changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I don't know if I'll ever find peace with it, but telling you this, putting it out there, feels like a start. Maybe now I can finally begin to let it go.